Do you know that just in the last 9 days around the world, over 600 earthquakes measuring over 2.5? Now, earthquakes are monitored and measured at far less than that. Some of them you don't feel. Most of them you don't feel, actually. But at 2.5 or more is fairly significant. Some going all the way up to 7 or 8 or whatever it may be. And, of course, we know the larger they get, the far more destructive they become. Many of these 600 that I tabulated when I went to my earthquake app that I have on my phone, and you can actually get that. You can just download an earthquake app, and you can monitor where it is, and you can see where they're happening. But many of those earthquakes have actually been here in the United States, and many of them have been in the proximity of volcanoes, many of which have been quiet for, up to 1,000 years. And a lot of people don't know that, but we have volcanoes, potentially large ones, right here in the United States. It seems odd that we would, but we do. Well, the one in the Philippines going off right now is spewing ash 6 to 9 miles into the atmosphere. It's amazing. And I look at all of this. My response is the Earth is groaning, it seems, moaning and becoming increasingly restive. And that's what a lot of people are saying. The question is it purely coincidental, or does it fit the warning of Christ, his disciples, about earthquakes and pestilences? And are we witnessing right now perhaps the precursors of things yet to come? So, Michael Snyder, you just posted an article in the one area that you write about. It's called The Most Important News, mostimportantnews.com. But you wrote an article there on this. Titled it was, Why Are Volcanoes All Over the Globe Suddenly Shooting Giant Clouds of Ash Miles into the Air? And in that article, which I have before me, you said, well, there have been over 1,000 earthquakes in Puerto Rico just in the past few days, so they would be less than 2.5, many of them. You said volcanoes have taken center stage. So bring us up to date, Michael, with volcanic activity, not just in the Philippines, other places too. Where is the activity happening?
Yes, Sam, and you once again, if you go to Matthew chapter 24, Jesus said one of the signs to watch for just prior to his return is earthquakes in diverse places. And so I'm very sensitive to indications of seismic activity around the world. And, and as I've been documenting on my websites for quite a while, our planet is becoming increasingly unstable. And so you mentioned this article that I just did. If people want to find it, they can go to the Drudge Report today, and it's right in the left-hand column of the Drudge Report, this article about volcanoes all over the world suddenly erupting, shooting hot ash literally miles into the air. For example, last Tuesday, one of the most important volcanoes in Alaska shot hot ash 25,000 feet into the air. So that's almost 5 miles into the air. And this is something that's happening in the United States, not the lower 48 states, but right there in Alaska. And then down south of us, down in Mexico. Then on Thursday, Mount Popocatépetl, and that's a mouthful, I know, but Mount Popocatépetl is actually one of the most important volcanoes in North America. Because in ancient times, historians tell us that Mount Popocatépetl would literally send these giant tsunamis of hot lava covering Aztec cities. I mean, just unimaginable death and destruction. But this volcano was silent for about 1,000 years, but then it started to roar to life in recent years, as so many of these volcanoes have, where we've seen once extinct volcanoes start to roar to life. Now, on Thursday, Mount Popocatépetl in Mexico shot hot ash nearly 4 miles into the sky. And why Mount Popocatépetl is so important is because literally 26 million people live within 60 miles of this volcano, because it's in close proximity to Mexico City. So the potential for a disaster, unlike anything Mexico has ever seen before, is there. And so this is something we want to watch very, very closely, because if a full catastrophic eruption of that volcano could literally change the entire society of Mexico overnight. But of course, that's not the only one going further south into South America, the Sabancaya volcano in Peru just shot ash approximately 24,000 feet into the air. Once again, almost 5 miles into the air. I mean, these are very, very impressive numbers. I mean, it's rare to see one volcano shoot ash that high into the air, but now within 1 week, we're seeing all these volcanoes all over the world do this. And then, of course, the one that's getting the most headlines is that volcano in the Philippines, which just erupted. Now, that one sent ash and rocks 6 to 9 miles into the sky. In fact, the ash has already reached the capital city of Manila, and red-hot lava is starting to gush out of the volcano. The authorities are warning that they're saying the worst may still be yet to come. In fact, they're specifically warning of a quote, hazardous explosive eruption to come there. And so we're very, very concerned about this because not only volcanoes, but of course earthquakes, where we've seen over 1,000 earthquakes in Puerto Rico just since last month when this earthquake swarm started. In fact,
Michael, let me just jump right in here, if you would, please, because I know we could go on and give a lot of information about what's going on around the world, but why do you think there's such an uptick of volcanic activity taking place right now? Would you say that this is an anomaly, or should we expect this to continue to escalate as we go forward?
I believe we are seeing an escalation. In fact, I often write that our planet is literally becoming more unstable, and that has serious implications for the future. And those of us that study Bible prophecy have been anticipating this, that before the return of Christ we would see this. But all over the world we've been seeing more earthquakes, more volcanoes erupting. We've been seeing an increase in activity, certainly from historic averages, but most Americans still aren't really paying close attention to this because there hasn't been a major disaster here in the United States yet, although last summer we did see the 7.1 and the 6.4 earthquakes in Southern California, the biggest earthquakes down there in decades. But until a major disaster, something like a Mount St. Helens, something like the big one hitting California, or a major earthquake along the New Madrid Fault, or something of that nature happens, well, because Americans, we're very focused on ourselves, and until something affects us personally, we're not going to pay attention. But as I've been carefully documenting all over the world, we're seeing things change. And so, for most of our lives, we've been able to assume that, well, our planet, there's always earthquakes, there's always volcanoes, but in general, our planet is going to be relatively stable. But that assumption is no longer safe anymore, I'm afraid.
Michael, we only have just a couple of minutes here. I don't know if you've written on this or not, but anybody who's been looking is noticing that the magnetic north, that we would say up close to the North Pole, has been moving and increasing in speed in its movement. It's now over Siberia. And that is threatening to make a lot of changes with tectonic plates and all that. It's suggesting that molten lava is moving under the ground. Have you written on that, and do you see that being a connected matter between increased earthquake activity and volcanic action?
Yeah, I have written about this in the past, and it's a huge concern because not only has the pole been moving rapidly, but there's been an acceleration, as you mentioned, of the magnetic pole moving. And so then this has caused many to speculate, well, could we see a full pole shift? And what would that look like? We don't know what that would look like because we've never actually observed that in modern human history. But, would that be a highly catastrophic event? What would that look like? And scientists have come up with different scenarios, and I've written about that, and potentially a catastrophe beyond anything that we could really imagine right now. So, that's another indication, Sam, of our world is changing, it's shifting, things are moving, it's becoming more unstable. So it's something we're watching very closely. It's something we're very, very concerned about. And that's another reason we could potentially see an increase, more of an increase in seismic activity as the magnetic pole is moving. As then, do we see a full pole shift? And that certainly plays into the end time scenario.
Boy, I tell you, we're just about at the break, so I'm not going to go too much further here right now, ladies and gentlemen, other than the fact of we're mentioning these things, both natural, as in earthquakes, volcanic activity. We mentioned the pole shift. It's a scientific matter. You can go out there, you can Google it, you can find it. It's been observed. It's happening. Humanly, there's not an explanation that really describes why, but the fact of the matter is, because it is happening, it is driving what's happening underneath the ground. And that is what's leading and infecting in part earthquake activity and volcanic activity. So all of these things are there. We need to note it. We need to observe it. And I said at the beginning, not to run from it and be ignorant of it, but to be informed by it. And I would say to help focus our lives and our prayer lives in an increased way.